Imagine you're stranded in the dead of winter, and I mean bone-chilling cold that seeps into your very bones. Think minus 30 degrees F winds howling through ancient pine forests. Now picture you have nothing but one sturdy tree, your bare hands, and a few crude tools at best. It sounds like a nightmare survival scenario, right? Well, what if I told you that Vikings, those rugged, bearded legends of the North, not only survived but thrived in these brutal conditions? And from just a single tree, they crafted over 50 essential tools, all within just 3 hours. No power tools, no modern explosives, just raw skill, raw will, and raw wood. So how on earth did they pull off this incredible feat? How did they turn a single tree into a toolbox that could outfit an entire ship's crew faster than you can brew a cup of coffee? This might be the strangest Viking survival trick you've never heard of, yet it's a perfect storm of ingenuity and efficiency. You might expect that felling a tree and making dozens of tools would take days, even weeks. But the Vikings were masters of speed and precision, blending raw muscle with a kind of woodcraft that feels almost magical today. They didn't just cut down a tree, they dissected it like a seasoned surgeon, extracting every last bit of value from bark to branch, knowing exactly where to carve, split, and shape. It's like watching a medieval version of a 3D printer, only way cooler because it's powered by sweat and ancient knowledge instead of electricity and code. Picture this: a dense fir tree, standing about 40 feet tall, freshly chopped at the base with a furious chop of a Viking axe. An axe forged not just for combat but optimized for woodworking, weighing around 3 pounds with a razor-sharp iron blade honed to perfection. Within minutes, this single tree becomes a raw pipeline of materials, ready to be transformed. The Vikings didn't just hack aimlessly. Every strike was calculated to separate the trunk into perfect billets and planks, enough to craft everything from handles for axes and spears to complex traps and cooking utensils. Now, think of modern survival tools like tactical knives, multi-tools, and camping gear. Efficient, lightweight, and multi-purpose. Vikings were the original multi-tool masters, but their tools were crafted on the spot with a precision that makes today's assembly lines look slow. Their skill was the medieval equivalent of a 1,000-watt heater on a freezing night, providing crucial warmth, protection, and function with limited resources. But the secret wasn't just in the speed or strength. It was in the tree itself. Vikings chose specific species like spruce and fir for their wood's remarkable properties. Spruce wood, for instance, has a density perfect for both durability and flexibility. It's light enough to carry, but strong enough to endure brutal winters and long voyages. Basically, it's nature's own version of Gore-Tex, providing insulation from cold and flexibility that could absorb shocks and impacts. This meant tools crafted from spruce could handle the rugged demands of daily Viking life without snapping under pressure. To understand just how impressive this is, consider the process of splitting the wood. Rather than sawing through every inch, something that would take forever, they used long wedges and strategic blows with mallets to cleave large sections along natural grain lines. It's like nature gave them a blueprint hidden in the wood's fibers, and all they had to do was follow it. This method allowed them to produce planks and strips in precise sizes, which they then shaped into handles, shafts, and planks for everything from shields to boats. And speaking of boats, here's a fun twist. The same tree that took 3 hours to reduce into tools and parts was also a major contributor to their famed longships. The longships needed thousands of meticulously carved components, planks for the hull, ribs for support, and pegs to hold it all together. Every piece had to fit perfectly, like a puzzle, and every section came from a deep understanding of wood properties and expert craftsmanship, all from that one tree. But it didn't stop there. The Vikings also harvested bark and resin from that single tree, turning them into everyday essentials. The bark wasn't just waste, it was like their version of insulated clothing. After peeling thin layers, Vikings twisted and braided strips into ropes and bindings, strong enough to lash planks or even string bows. Bark fibers could even be turned into padding for warmth. Think of it as an ancient hot water bottle or a parachute lining, trapping warm air close to the body to stave off hypothermia. And what about the resin? This sticky, amber-like substance seeping from cuts in the bark was every Viking's secret weapon for waterproofing and fire starting. Imagine being able to light a fire in the pouring rain with just a few shavings and a spark. Resin was a natural adhesive too, perfect for sealing cracks in boats or even fixing broken tools on the fly, kind of like a medieval super glue that was indispensable on long sea voyages. Then there's the crafting of cutting edges. The Vikings would take the harder knots and offshoots from the tree's branches, combining them with sharpened stones or iron tools to create sickles, scrapers, and even arrow-fletching sticks. Branch wood, though smaller and more irregular, offered unique shapes perfect for handling and gripping tools, giving Vikings a variety of specialized equipment. This specialization is what made their toolkits so versatile and comprehensive. Every piece had a purpose, every shape a story. Imagine you're standing there, watching one Viking expertly carve a spear shaft from a smooth plank. With each shaving that falls, the shaft balances perfectly in his hands, light and strong. Next to him, another Viking splits a block of wood into tiny pieces that will become nails and pegs used in construction. With speed that would rival a pro assembly line, dozens of tools emerge simultaneously, all from that single mighty tree. But here's the catch. Temperatures were dropping rapidly as the sun began to set, and the frigid air made fingers numb within minutes. And yet, these craftsmen kept working, their hands steady, their minds sharp. How? Because they engineered their space and workflow to maximize warmth and efficiency. They gathered dry sticks and pine needles from the forest floor to burn small fires nearby, and some wore layers of felted wool and fur, primitive but highly effective insulation, like the medieval version of bubble wrap holding in precious heat. Of course, all that warmth would vanish if they didn't manage the moisture. That's where Viking ingenuity really shines. Their clothing and tents were treated carefully to repel water, thanks in part to those sticky tree resins and oils that made fabrics slightly water-resistant. Picture a tent pitched amidst snow, yet inside, the warmth feels like a cozy campfire evening, partly thanks to this simple natural tech. And speaking of warmth, one clever trick was elevating sleeping areas off the cold ground using wooden platforms carved from the very same tree. Sleeping above the freezing earth prevented heat loss, a principle scientists today call thermal bridging, where cold, transferable surfaces suck heat away from the body. Vikings intuitively avoided chilling to the bone by layering these wood platforms with furs and moss, which acted as natural insulators and bedding together, forming a multi-layer defense against frostbite that was just as smart as modern camping gear. But even with wood platforms and fires, darkness crept in early, forcing the Vikings to prepare tools that would last into the long winter nights. Lighting was a challenge, especially when storms blocked the moon and stars. The solution? Simple wooden lamps carved from the tree, filled with animal fat and capped with wick made from braided bark fibers. These lamps burned steadily for hours, enough to work by even when the darkness outside was as thick as ink. Think of it as the fossil fuel lantern of the Viking era. As night approached, the pile of tools grew bigger and bigger. Everything from hand drills to fire plows, scrapers, needles, fish hooks, combs, and even small toys for Viking children emerged, all from the bounty of this singular tree. The speed, the precision, the sheer variety was astonishing. And somehow, those tools weren't crude or makeshift. They were finely crafted, balanced, and durable, designed to last the harshest winters and toughest battles. But the question remains, how did they coordinate this massive operation? Were there secret techniques handed down like sacred knowledge? Did they have personal roles, master carvers, splitters, burners, that ensured the work moved like a well-oiled machine? The answer lies not only in their tools, but in their community. The Vikings worked in tight-knit groups where every hand had a job and every eye knew the plan. Some would fell the tree while others split, carved, or prepared materials. This wasn't just survival, it was an act of art, science, and teamwork. And as you imagine this bustling scene, the rhythmic sound of axes biting into wood, shavings falling like snowflakes, the glow of evening fires, there's a sense of awe for these ancestors who could do so much with so little. But even with all this mastery, their work wasn't finished at the tree. Next came the finishing touches, polishing, sharpening, assembling, because a tool is only as good as how well it's used. And that part is a story too incredible to miss. Stick around for the next part where we dive deep into the final steps Vikings took to bring those 50 tools to life, and how their legacy still whispers in modern craftsmanship, survival tactics, and even today's outdoor gear. Trust me, you won't believe some of the Viking hacks that still make sense nearly 1,000 years later. Now, imagine the scene shifting from raw cutting to the final, delicate dance of finishing each tool. This is where Viking mastery truly shines. Once the timber was split and roughly shaped, it wasn't just tossed aside. It was meticulously carved, sanded, and polished to achieve perfect balance and usability. Picture a Viking craftsman holding a nearly finished axe handle, running his fingers along its smooth curve, adjusting thickness millimeter by millimeter for the perfect grip. The secret: they used natural abrasives found right in the earth, fine sand, crushed quartz, even pumice stones, which, when combined with water, created a medieval version of sandpaper. This attention to detail transformed rough chunks of wood into tools that balanced power with precision. Light enough not to tire the user, but heavy enough to deliver deadly force. And speaking of force, sharpening was another critical stage. Vikings had simple yet ingenious ways to keep their tools razor-sharp without modern grinders. They crafted whetstones from sandstone layers found along riverbeds, carefully shaped and maintained to a fine edge. Imagine the rhythm: a steady back and forth of stone on iron, dust floating through the cold air like tiny sparks. Sharpening wasn't just about making a blade, it was about survival. A dull axe in the dead of winter or a chipped spear shaft meant a failed hunt, or worse, death. This was the medieval equivalent of a tactical upgrade, turning each tool into a lifeline. But all this craftsmanship would be useless if the tools didn't come together into functional units. Vikings excelled not only at carving but at assembly, joining wood with iron, bone, and sinew. To fasten parts, they drilled tiny holes in wood with a hand drill or fire. Drill, a technique that relied on spinning a wooden shaft rapidly against a base plate, generating enough friction to bore into dense wood. Imagine the smoke curling as the craftsmen worked feverishly to create pegs, nails, and bindings that would hold weapons, sleds, and even parts of their homes sturdily together. The efficiency was incredible. What might take a modern novice hours to drill, a Viking team did dozens in minutes. And here's a mind blower: they often used what's called a mortise and tenon joint, where one piece of wood is carved to fit snugly into a corresponding cavity in another piece, creating a puzzle-like lock without nails or glue. This technique, combined with ropes braided from bark fibers, gave incredible strength while allowing some flexibility, a necessity when your longship rides crashing waves or your spear withstands the impact in battle. It's basically nature's original shock absorption system, a medieval suspension bridge in miniature. But even with perfect fitting, wood expands and contracts with weather. The Vikings countered this by applying layers of natural oils and tars, often derived from pine resin heated and purified over open flames. Imagine a craftsman carefully brushing the sticky, amber liquid over hull planks or tool handles, sealing pores and adding a layer of waterproof armor. This not only protected tools from rot and wear, but made surfaces slick, reducing friction and making tools easier to handle in freezing conditions. Think of it as the ancestor to modern waterproof coatings like silicone sprays and waterproof waxes. Now, what about storage? The last thing you want is your freshly crafted toolkit getting soaked or frozen solid. The Vikings ingeniously crafted wooden boxes and cases from planks carved from that single tree, cleverly designed with tight lids, and sometimes lined with animal hides to regulate humidity and temperature. Think of them as the medieval equivalent of rugged tackle boxes or high-tech waterproof pouches we use today, but made entirely from natural materials, their precision fit preventing warping and moisture buildup. And while these containers held tools, there was an entire ecosystem of wooden utensils made to support everyday life. Spoons, bowls, drinking horns with carved holders, all ergonomically designed to be strong yet lightweight. Imagine scooping hot stew from a carved wooden bowl, the heat radiating comfortably thanks to the insulative properties of the wood. Unlike metal, wood doesn't conduct heat quickly, preventing burned fingers and making long meals possible even in freezing conditions. The versatility didn't end with cold weather survival either. The same woodworkers could produce delicate musical instruments like flutes and lyres, crafted from fine branches, hollowed out and tuned with precision. This served a psychological role by boosting morale during harsh winters, kindling a sense of community and cultural identity, an ancient form of mental survival, equally as vital as food or warmth. But let's circle back to the operation's core, timing and teamwork. To truly understand how Vikings made 50 tools from one tree in just 3 hours, picture a meticulously choreographed process, almost like a surgical team during an emergency. The fellers start by chopping the base, while splitters follow instantly, wedges poised to separate grain with minimal wasted effort. Carvers and assemblers work simultaneously, one group shaping spear shafts while another sharpens knives, and yet another prepares barrels or storage crates. This assembly line efficiency, enhanced by generations of shared knowledge, means wood doesn't lie idle. Tools are passed hand to hand seamlessly like a well-oiled machine. And this team spirit extended beyond mere efficiency. It was a survival imperative. Imagine cold hands trembling in the twilight, knowing each completed arrowhead or fishhook represents a meal, each sturdy bucket or barrel a chance at storing summer bounty to stave off starvation. It was a network of interdependence where everyone needed everyone else. Some Viking communities even developed what we might call tool maintenance stations, where specialized craftsmen repaired and restored tools after long voyages or battles. This meant the single tree's worth of tools could be reused and reconditioned for months or years. It's like combining a field hospital with a factory, always ready to refit, sharpen, or rebuild, maximizing every piece of the initial harvest. And this remarkable ingenuity still speaks to us today. Backcountry, survival experts, and traditional woodworkers study Viking methods to understand efficiency, sustainability, and resilience. Modern outdoor gear companies take cues from their layered protection systems and natural waterproofing techniques. Even minimalist campers seek to emulate the Viking ethos, making the most from one resource, respecting nature's limits while pushing human potential. So, at the heart of this Viking feat is a timeless lesson. Human creativity thrives under pressure, and constraints breed innovation. From a single towering tree rising above frozen earth, these ancestors carved hope, safety, and continuity. Each tool was more than wood and iron. It was a promise to endure, to return, to conquer the brutal unknown. And as you picture that lone tree standing tall, beginning its transformation in the hands of fierce, focused craftsmen, remember this: every choice the Vikings made was driven by a deep commitment to protect their families, honor their community, and secure their future in a world as harsh as it was beautiful. Their legacy isn't just in the tools or ships left behind, but in the whisper of human resilience that echoes through time. In a way, we're still shaped by these ancient hands. Whenever we craft something from raw materials, improvise under pressure, or come together as a team to overcome daunting odds, we inherit that spirit. The spirit that turned one tree into 50 tools in 3 hours, defying the impossible and forging survival itself. So next time you're tempted to underestimate the power of simple resources or the wisdom of old traditions, think of the Vikings working side by side in the cold, skilled enough to build a world from a single tree. Because sometimes, the greatest innovations come not from complexity, but from the ruthless clarity of purpose. And that's a lesson worth carrying into every challenge we face today.